Hello and welcome to another firefly beading tutorial. In this video today I'm going to be showing you how I knot beads with using French wire. The French wire we sell comes in several thicknesses. Today I'm using heavy, but for instance this is fine. I know there's medium, heavy, extra heavy, that sort of thing. So it really just depends on the cord you're using. Today I'm using a size 8 Griffin nylon cord, and I know it fits through the heavy. Have my beads and know that this will fit through twice in some of the beads. I do have a video that explains a little bit more about this cording that I'll post below, as well as a knotting technique. You also need your clasp, knotting tweezers if you need them, some sharp cutters, and Hypo cement. So this is essentially what we're going to be creating, so you see how the French wire goes just at the very end where your clasp is going to go. So carefully take it out. You don't want to bend it too much, but this is what French wire looks like. If I were to pull it apart, it looks kind of like a spring, maybe like a slinky, but once it's pulled apart you really can't use that piece, so you need to cut that off, but that's what it looks like. Sharp cutters are ideal for this. You don't technically want to use the same ones for your thread, but this is very, very fine wire, so easy to cut. Now, because I'm using a thicker, like a heavy set wire, I do want it to be almost half an inch. Keeps falling off here, but half an inch would give me enough of a pass through for my clasp. If I'm using a finer wire, I might only do 1/4 of an inch. So it just kind of trial and error on what works best for your clasp, unfortunately. Once you have one piece cut, you can go in and cut your second piece. Now the main thing you want to check is that there are no, nubbies or tails sticking out. You want a nice clean circle here, a clean hole where your thread won't get cut, so you can kind of shave off whatever coil might be bent in the way. So check both pieces. You also want to have 4 beads set to the side that have large enough holes to pass through your cord twice. So this one is what you want to look like. So I've got 4 here. I'm going to put 2 for later at the very end of our necklace and 2 to begin with. And then I just kind of clear everything out of the way. The first thing we want to do is add on our 2 large hole beads, a piece of French wire, and just very carefully slide it over, so you see, making sure it doesn't get caught on anything, and you can bring it on down. So you have to have a little bit of a tail. I would say at least 3 inches. You can go ahead and add on your clasp now, at least 1/2 of your clasp. So just so you can see, I'm using a big clasp here. But you got your clasp, your French wire, and 2 beads. And now we want to feed our thread through. You can knot the end, or you can just hold the end like this so your beads don't fall off. But you essentially just take your needle and put it through towards the tail. And it's easier said than done sometimes. So this bead might have a little bit of a tighter hole, which is why my thread is catching on itself and pulling everything through. So just have patience and continue to pull your needle thread, which I call your working thread, through without tangling everything else. Don't lose your bead off the end. That's why it's best to knot the very bottom. So just slowly work this. And remember, I don't want to have a massive long tail, just enough that I could tie off things with. So about a 3-inch tail. So that's why I'm sliding my bead down and then pulling. And you want it to do a nice little loop, so it'll tangle on itself a little bit, or it could. So again, just very patient until you get a nice loop like this. So your jump ring or your clasp should be able to slide pretty easily without being too tight in there. Now we're just gonna do an overhand knot, so like we're about to tie our shoe, over, under, and pull that through, and then pull tight. So we still have our other bead we have to go through. So again, we're going to take our needle and go towards our tail. So that way. and pull it. This one's going a lot easier. And pop it in place. Make sure there's no excess slack, and then tie an overhand knot over under and pull tight. It's very important that we glue these knots here, so we need to use Hypo cement. I only say Hypo cement because it's got a great little needle to get into these tight spaces. You also want to make sure you put glue on the tail that we're going to cut off, just a little bit. It'll make cutting easier so things don't fray when you cut. Once everything's dry, you can go ahead and snip off this as close as you can to the knot without cutting the knot. And then readjust your thread, kind of pulling it this way. So now we're ready to start knotting. Do not use the large hole beads. Start with these and keep the large hole to the end. So to knot, you just go over, put a bead on, then over, under, and through. And then if you're using tweezers, I come in backwards, like a backwards L, pinch that, and then pull my tail. So I have a more detailed video on this that I'll post below that explains cording, how to pick it, how to choose it, and then also how to do the tweezer method. But also in that video it'll explain this, which is another quick, fast way if you can do it, where instead of doing one bead at a time, you go ahead and thread on several beads, if not the whole strand. And then once you've got enough on there, you simply slide one bead down and do a knot that way. You can't always use this method, but it's a great, fast, and quick way to knot as well, because you don't have to thread each one and then knot, each one then knot. You can simply just do this. Both of these methods will be explained in the video I post below as well. So I'm getting towards the end here, and you'll see after I knot this that basically I have 3 beads left. I have 1 bead left to string on, and then I have the 2 from the very beginning that we laid to the side, the larger hole beads. So basically you just want to add on this last guy here and then the 2 larger hole beads. So no knots between these guys. So you'll see bead here, knot, bead, no knot, bead, no knot, bead. So 2 spaces without knots here. So you've got your 3 beads on, and you're ready to now add on your French wire, the second piece. So gently pull that on, and also add on your clasp, the last end of your clasp. So we need to feed our wire back through the first bead and then the second bead. You also want to pay attention to your spacing between your beads as you do this. It's going to move as you're doing it, but you don't want to have large gaps. So I'll explain that in a second. So go ahead and push your wire through and be careful not to catch your thread. Be careful your French wire doesn't get sucked inside your bead, so I'm kind of holding it in place. And then I touch the 4th bead in and then put my finger on all these to keep them stable as I gently pull my tail. Don't let that wire get sucked in your bead. And form this loop. And you don't want to have any gaps or thread showing, so just pull when you need to get rid of these gaps. And you should just have a fraction of space between each bead now. And then you're ready to do an overhand. So over, under, and through, and then gently pull this tail, keeping everything between these first 2 beads. So we're essentially putting a knot right here, an overhand knot. And you could give it a nice tug till it gets tight and forms a knot. Then we need to pass through our second bead. Now, sometimes if you can't get it through, you've got to bend things a certain way. You really don't want to catch the cord inside and fray it, so you've got to move things around until you can get your needle to pass through nice and smooth. And every now and then you might need to use a little tool to help you do this. Kind of just wiggle and then pop it through. Then you're just going to pull it, but you have to be careful of this loop around my fingers here. You see this thread that we're pulling through might start to knot on itself just like it did at the beginning. Because it's a twisted thread, sometimes it does do this, and you just have to have patience and use your tweezers to help keep, a tension on this loop as you pull until you possibly can't. Because you don't want to have a massive knot before you can even create a smooth knot. So I just give it a yank, and with this thicker thread, you can definitely pull on it and get that excess thread through there. With a thinner thread, you got to be a little bit careful. But now we're ready to put this knot in between. So again, over, under, and through. And again, keeping your thread between these two beads right here and then pulling tight. So now we have a knot between here as well. And now you really need to glue these just as we did in the beginning. Really making sure you're getting a good bit of glue on both sides, and then also the tail, remember, that we will be cutting off. Once everything is dry, you can come on in with those sharp scissors or cutters. And again, get as close as you can to that knot without cutting the knot. And you should have something that looks like this, and it's a very secure way of knotting. So 2 French wire coils and then knots in between every bead. Now you'll notice sometimes when you knot, things, are pretty tight. So, it's strong enough that you can kind of pull on it just a hair, loosen it up, work it in so it's a little bit more fluid, and the knots relax a little bit. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'll try to answer them as I can. And please don't forget to hit like or subscribe to our channel for more beading tips like this. Happy beading from us at Firefly.